What is the best flathead bait? I'd say this is probably like a top 3 question that I either see or have been asked to me. I think it's like people are always wanting like validation, why they are or are not catching fish, or how they can explain why other people are catching fish. Oh, it's because they're using the right bait. No, I don't believe that personally. I think people are catching fish for a number of other reasons. It has almost nothing to do with the bait. I can guarantee you almost with certainty that it has nothing to do with the bait that you're using, unless you're just doing something crazy. If you're using live bait especially, or fresh cut bait, I can promise you it has nothing to do with the bait you're using. So today I'm gonna go through 3 main questions of how I decide what the best flathead bait is, right? Here's the crazy part. Almost all of you are gonna have something different. But before we get into this, I'm gonna tell you guys a story. So from the time I was about 5 years old till about 20, we really stopped like the hardcore trot lining, bank lining activity that we were doing, where we were catching hundreds of flatheads a year. And every flathead we catch, about over 10, 12 pounds, we would cut them open and see what was in their stomach. We did this with all of them, every single one of them. Now, if they were under about 10 pounds, we didn't mess with them. We just cut the fillets out and go. There was 3 fish. If there was a fish in their stomach, it was one of these 3 fish. Every single time. I would say between 90 to 95% of the time it was these 3 fish. But before I tell you what those 3 fish are, I would really appreciate if you guys hit that like button, and if you haven't, go down and hit the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. All right, let's keep going. So if you think you know what those 3 fish are in the Midwest, I'm talking river within the Midwest region of the United States, and I would say the South as well is going to have all these species as well. Go ahead and write down in the comment section below what you think those 3 fish are. I can tell you this, out of all the baits that I've heard people say is their favorite or is the best, no one has ever one time told me one of those 3 fish. Never. It's never happened. What's the best flathead bait? There's a difference between saying what is my favorite bait and what is my best bait. Today we're talking about what's the best bait. What's your best bait?
Yeah, boy.
Right? I'm about to tell you how to come to the conclusion of what your best bait is. First question I want you to ask yourself. I do this literally almost every single time I go flathead fishing. In my head, I do this every single time. I have to. And when you hear the questions, you're going to realize why. The first thing that I ask myself is it legal to use in the body of water that I'm going? Sounds like a no-brainer, right? So I got a whole list of fish in my head that I can take. I've got to narrow it down. So like take bullheads, for example. There are certain places where you cannot take those fish, that people just say no. Either the state or the private landowner, whoever says, no, we don't want you using these fish. So you can't use them for bait. Green sunfish, that's another one. Shad, that's another one. Okay, there's a ton of them. There's a ton of baits out there, and you just need to be mindful of it, right? Okay, so is it legal, right? The second question you need to ask yourself, and probably one of the most important, it's right up there with the legal part, is do you have access to it? There is 2 baits that you guys have never seen me use on my channel. Never. One of them is a bullhead, and the other one is a shad. Now the shad is for 2 different reasons. One, I only get shad in one spot, and I don't really have a way to keep them alive, so I don't mess with them. The other one is bullheads. I really don't have a place where I can go and catch a bullhead. I don't even have a place where I can go and reasonably think I'm going to catch a bullhead. So right out the door, right there, gone. Bullheads, no. Most of you are sitting there going, oh my gosh, bullheads are the best. It doesn't matter if you can't catch them, so why are you going to waste time thinking about it? And that's true for all of them, right? The third question I want you to ask yourself is the logistics side of this bait. How well does it perform on a hook? How easy is it to catch them? And can you transport them and keep them alive, right? So basically all of the intangibles. It doesn't make very much sense. It's like I was talking about shad a minute ago. It doesn't make very much sense for me to use shad if I can't even keep them alive, right? And I can't catch some shad and some other fish because the shad will actually end up inadvertently killing my other baits as well. The reason why that is shad shed their scales. And if you don't have a super strong filtration system on your water, on your tank, whatever, then those tiny little scales will actually get caught in the gills of other fish and kill them too, right? So for most people, shad are gonna go out the window, unless you've got like a special tank for them. Bullheads, they stay alive really good. They're a hardy little fish. Green sunfish, that's another one. Hardy little fish. They're tough, right? So once you've asked yourself all these questions, I'm hoping that in your area, you've narrowed that down. So you're talking about a bait that is legal for you to use, that you can go get in great quantity and that you have access to, and performs very well on a hook, and you can keep it alive really good, right? I want you guys to all take a second and just think of what that fish is to you. Okay, you got it? All right, now go back down to the comment section and write that in right now. I would love to hear from you guys and tell me what your best baits are, right? Based on how I just said it, what are your best baits? I really would like to know. I'll just tell you right now what mine are. Mine are creek chubs. Now, I've heard people say creek chubs before. Not very many, but some flatheaders do. That's just something that I have tremendous success with. I have tremendous access to. I can keep them alive really easy, and they perform well on a hook. They're just a really good bait for me. The other is one that I've never heard anyone else ever say. Ever, never. And that is a long-eared sunfish. I'll put a picture up right now, and this is what they look like. I'm sure a ton of you guys have seen them. You guys call them all kinds of stuff like pumpkin seeds and stuff, but their actual name is a long-eared sunfish. I grew up calling them pumpkin seeds. I don't really think that's what they are. They're long-eared sunfish. The long-eared sunfish is one of the best on-the-hook baits I've ever used in my life. These things are tough. They will take a beating. I've had gar just totally rip their sides out, and these things still keep swimming. Okay, these things will survive in stagnant water. If the batteries on your aerator die, these things, they survive it, right? Like they're an awesome bait. Now back to that first thing that I was talking about earlier, about all the flatheads that we cut open and what was in their stomach. Do you know that? I hope you guys wrote something down, right? Because I'm about to tell you what they were. Okay, you ready for this? The first one, I have a couple of times heard people say things like, oh yeah, I like to use them. Yeah, they're a pretty good bait. But I don't think I've ever heard anyone ever say those are my absolute best favorites. I will use those every single time. And that is a red horse sucker, or golden red horse sucker, or silver red horse sucker, or silver horse sucker. I don't know. There's like 12 different varieties of red horse sucker or whatever. And I got a video of me catching one last winter. You guys never saw this footage because this was literally the only fish that I caught. I'm going to play that for you right now. Here's what one looks like. And this was actually a really big one, right? Like, it's not huge, gigantic, gymongous, but it's a pretty decent 2 to 3 pounder, and I hope you guys like this one. Just reeling this in to go home, and there was something on this. What is it? What are you? Are you what I think you are? Holy crap, you guys. Oh God. Okay. Oh my God, it's a sucker. No. Oh wow. Look at this dude. This is what you call a red horse sucker. They got red fins. Wow. I've been looking to catch one of these for years. I've only caught one other one, and I was a little boy when I did it. Oh my God. Look at this. Let's get this hook out. Yeah. Look at that. This right here is like premium flathead bait. You can cut these guys up or use them whole. This guy's a hair big. A hair big, but I mean, a big flathead would eat that guy no problem. Oh my God, that is amazing. Look at that fish. It's about 2.5 pounds. That's a big one. That is a very big red horse sucker. Look at his mouth. Looks kind of funny. Easy. They'll bite all winter long. They're one of those fish that just, they eat all the time. They don't care. They're pretty slow. They're super soft biters too. Oh, that is beautiful. Super, super excited about that. I was packing up, calling it a day, and this guy just happened to be there eating on it. Let's get it back in the water. All right, so now that you guys have seen that footage, that's a red horse sucker, right? And that fish right there, I know it's like 2 or 3 pounds. A lot of people would be like, oh, that's way too big a bait. And if you're going to be using a rod and reel, for most people, it is too big of a bait. You either need to have a double hook rigged up, and you're gonna have to hook that fish on 2 ends most likely, or you need like a 14-aught hook or something like that, something crazy, and you're gonna want to hook that fish somewhere in the front of the face. And the reason why is because it's such a big bait that even a very large one, a very large flathead, let's say 35-40 pounds, would not be able to get that whole thing in its mouth. And if you hook that thing in the ass end, its ass end's going to be sticking out of its mouth, and it's not going to do you any good. So go ahead and hook that fish in the mouth, or at least near the head, on top of the back, somewhere that it's going to be inside its mouth. All right, let's talk about the other two. The other two, I've seen people use these for bait, but I've never ever once in my life heard anyone say that these are the best baits. A buffalo, here's a picture of a buffalo, and a freshwater drum. Red horse sucker, freshwater drum, big mouth, smallmouth buffalo, right? One of those 3 fish was almost always exclusively in that thing's stomach. Almost every single one of them. I've never, ever, never one time ever heard anybody say that those are their favorite baits. Okay, now your favorite bait is different than your best bait, right? Your best bait is the bait your go-to. You can get them when you need them. They stay alive a long time. It just makes everything else so much easier. That's your best bait. Your favorite bait, however, favorite bait is the one. For me, that's probably a green sunfish, but I don't have a tremendous amount of access to them, so I really don't. I kind of just, if I catch one, that's great, but I don't rely on them at all. Now, this is just my opinion, guys. This is how I look at it. You can flip-flop those around and say, well, you're really talking about your favorite bait, or it's not your best bait. Well, to me, your best bait is the one that you can get anytime you want, and it still works. And I guess the whole premise of all of this is, did I say really anything about what I think a flathead's preference was? Because I don't believe there is one. Why do I think those 3 fish were found in the stomachs of flatheads almost exclusively? I did find other things, like every once in a while you find a largemouth bass. We found sauger, spotted bass, white bass. I've really seen them all. Interesting, I don't know if I ever told you guys this, but I caught a bigger flathead early in the year. It was like 44 pounds, something like that. What I didn't tell you guys was about 12 or 13 feet behind me was a tiny little creek mouth that was full of bait fish, little itty bitty tiny bait fish, and there was stuff in there chasing them. Well, I started throwing a Popeye jig in there, and guess what I started catching? White bass. All of them about that long. One of them was a huge white bass. It was, I don't know, it was probably like 15, 16 inches long. It was a really big white bass. But anyway, what do you think that flathead was doing? He was coming right up there to start eating some white bass. But every once in a while we'd find crappies and stuff like that in them too. We really found other things over the course of years, but I'm talking 95% of the time it was a sucker, a drum, or a buffalo in their stomach. Almost every single time, but I've never heard anybody say that. Now, those are your live baits, right? What about cut baits? Everybody always talks about cut baits. Dave, you didn't even mention cut shad. I don't really care. Me personally, there are certain circumstances that I want to use a cut bait. One of those being really early in the springtime, like really early on. Here in Indiana, I'm talking like April and the beginning of May, when the water temperature is still in the 50 to 55, maybe creeping up to 60 type. I'm going to be using tiny cut baits during that time. I'm also going to be catching channels, but I'm going to be using tiny cut baits. When a fish comes out of its lethargic state after being in frigidly cold water, they're not looking for a giant meal. They're not out there trying to crush it, with a 1.5 pound bream or something like that, or a big 2.5 pound sucker. He's looking for something easy to eat, right? His stomach has really, his whole everything has not really caught up to itself yet. He needs a little bit more time to warm up, so they're eating easy, small, little baits quite often, right? So I like the little cut baits then. I also like cut bait in the springtime, especially when the water's up. It's muddy, it's nasty. The reason why we use live baits to begin with is vibration. When the water is ripping, roaring, vibration doesn't do you a whole lot of good unless that fish is right up on it, right? Like, that's the whole point of live bait, is the vibration. But the vibration's not doing you very good when the river is literally ripping. What does do you good? Scent, right? The scent, that doesn't fail. That's going to keep on keeping on, right? You don't have to worry about nothing. So I really like to use cut baits in the really cold part of the early year, and I like to use it when the water is up, right? And it's dingy. That's when I like to use cut baits. And in the fall, the very late fall. I know it's been a while since I've released a video, guys, and I really apologize. But I've just been super busy. I've got a job and I had to catch up on a lot. So content's going to be out a little bit more often now. Just had to get a lot of work done and keep it on. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Like I said, like the video, please subscribe. We're closing in on 1,000. I really appreciate you guys watching. You guys are awesome. Until next time, go catch a big fish.